button right there, whenever I check it on the ohms wise, is completely open. So here's your two pickup coils. This one down here on the bottom is for your rear cylinder, and then this one on the top is actually for your front cylinder. What's going on, YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. Well, as you can see behind me, I've got the African Twin tore down pretty good bit, and the reason being is that I come down here about a week ago and started the African Twin and was going to actually try to ride it to work the next day, and I just never could get it to run. It didn't sound right, and in order to get it to run, I had to just choke it or just, give it almost full throttle. And like I said, it just wasn't sounding right. And so in order to diagnose it to a bad pickup coil, I had to tear it down this far. And I kind of wanted to go over how I come to that determination. That way y'all would know, if you got a bad pickup coil. So as you kind of know, the three things that you need for an internal combustion engine to run is compression, spark, and fuel. And I really didn't have any reason to question the compression because it's been running fine. And these motors are, pretty reliable. Honda's got a very reliable motor, so I didn't have any doubt that I had compression. So the next thing I wanted to look at, because these Africa Twins have really bad fuel pumps, is check the fuel. In order to do that, I took the fuel line off of the fuel pump that goes into the carburetors, started it up, and was able to see fuel kind of spitting out. So that eliminated fuel for the most part. I kind of was thinking, okay, well, it must be spark. So while it was running, I kind of somewhat felt the exhaust to kind of see what cylinder I was kind of dealing with. And the front cylinder, you kind of feel a little bit of heat, but your rear cylinder was completely cold. So I kind of knew right then that I was dealing with just the rear cylinder. And normally if you have a fuel issue, you're not going to have, heat on the front cylinder, not on the rear cylinder. It's going to be kind of the same. So that, once again, kind of pointed toward electrical. So I kind of want to show you a little diagram right here on kind of my thought process on how I come to what part of the electrical issue I was having. So the first thing you're going to need in order to diagnose your electrical and make sure you're getting spark is one of these, what I call a spark plug testers. And the way it works is you're going to actually put this in right here into the actual spark plug boot, but you're going to put this in right here into on top of the spark plug so that you're passing your spark all the way through it. And this actually has a light that flashes every time the pickup coil tells it to fire, and this is what it looks like on video. So you can see that this is very helpful at helping you diagnose whether you're getting spark to the actual spark plug. But if you don't have one of these, get a Phillips head screwdriver or a JAS screwdriver or something really small that you can put into the spark plug boot, and make sure it's got a piece of plastic or a rubber end on it and the other side's metal. And once you stick the metal part into your spark plug boot, touch it to something metal real close to the the spark plug wire, and as you turn the motor over, you should see some type of spark going across. Now, if you're touching the metal part of that thing, it's going to actually light you up pretty good. So like I said, make sure you're holding the plastic or the rubber part of it so that you're not getting shocked. So what I did was I actually put this in line with the rear cylinder on the first spark plug, because as you know, these Africa Twins actually have two rear spark plugs in the front, and also two coils for each spark plug. So when I put this on the first spark plug, I wasn't getting any kind of spark whatsoever, but I went ahead and put it on the other spark plug just to kind of see if maybe I have just a bad coil right there for firing just a spark plug. When I put it on the other one, I also wasn't getting any kind of spark between here. So that kind of told me, okay, let me go back one step in the process, as you can see in this diagram. The next thing before the actual coils is your ignition. So these African twins have really bad ignitions, and so in order to try to make sure that the ignition was putting out the correct voltage, I actually did this troubleshooting right here. So what you're going to need in order to do the next part of troubleshooting is going to be actually a voltmeter, one that has DC and also ohms, because you're going to be checking some ohms later in this process. But I'm actually going to first set it to DC, and what I'm going to do is pull your wires off of your actual coils. The wires you have on your rear cylinder are going to be a green and some type of white dotted. That's going to be your ground, but you also have a blue and black stripe, and that's going to be your positive. So what you're going to do is put your positive lead into your blue wire with black and your ground onto your green wire. All right, now that I have those two connected and I'm kind of holding them apart so they don't accidentally touch, you're going to turn your key on. And then you're going to spin the motor over so that the pickup coil is telling that cylinder to fire. And if you'll watch right here, this voltage is actually going to be going up. So you saw that it jumped up to like 200 something volts. So you know that you have actual continuity going to that coil, telling it to fire the spark plug. So when I was doing that before, I actually had very little voltage. Now, to kind of give me a general idea of what that voltage should be, I actually checked the front cylinder, and the front cylinder is kind of doing what it's doing now, which is around 200 volts DC. But the rear cylinder was only giving me like 0 to 19 volts or something real small. And you need, like I said, about 200 volts in order to fire the coil in order to get your spark to the spark plug. So I kind of diagnosed it, you know, I said, okay, well, I'm not getting enough voltage to the coils to tell them to fire correctly. And so once again, like I said, I kind of said, okay, well, these African twins are really bad about having a bad ignition, so that must be what the issue is. So as you can look here on this diagram, I kind of went back a step to kind of understand, you know, what is telling the ignition to tell the coils to tell spark plugs to fire. And when I've looked at it back, I've kind of found the two pickup coils that are, you know, down here next to your alternator. And in order to test that out, I actually went in and found where that wire goes. So on your left hand side, behind this cover right here is where your actual ignition is. And down here below that is the wires that are going to your two coils for your front and rear cylinder. Well, right here is your blue and black stripe that's going to your rear cylinder, and this black with a yellow stripe is actually going to your front cylinder, to those coils. So in order to unplug this to make sure that we're getting, you know, the connectivity to the ignition to tell it to, you know, send it on down the path, you want to actually pull this out to the outside and pull towards you, like so. So the process on actually troubleshooting all this is not very clear in the book. It does tell you what the ohms are supposed to be on the pickup coil, and also kind of tells you where it's at, but like I said, it's very vague on, you know, the actual troubleshooting of it. And so the voltmeter that we was using earlier, you're going to want to actually change it to ohms. And then, like I said, we're checking the rear cylinder, and so we're going to use that whitish with the yellow stripe and that green with a white stripe. And as you can see right here in the diagram, the green and white stripe are tied together going to your front and rear pickup coils. But the same process for checking the front pickup coil will work for the rear pickup coil. And what you're going to do is your black wire, you're going to want to stick on your green and white wire, and then your red lead or your positive, you're going to stick on your white with the yellow stripe. And as you see right there, if I can get it on there good, I've got 204 ohms on my new pickup coil. So here's the old one right here, and I've already cut the two ends off right there because I'm actually going to use the wire to actually pull the new wires through. But the old one right there, whenever I check it on the ohms wise, is completely open. And so what that means is that somewhere in the coil on the inside is actually going to be, the wires are broken up. You know, it's not getting continuity between there. So that's the troubleshooting steps on how to determine whether you had a bad pickup coil. And I appreciate y'all bearing with me on, you know, kind of explaining that troubleshooting process, because, you know, like I said, the manual wasn't very clear, and just having some electronic background and working in electronics is kind of what helped me, you know, use those steps and also the wiring diagram to determine that I had a bad pickup coil. It's one of those that I went online and tried to find a new pickup coil, and using the part number that you see right here, and I was unsuccessful. I had a few people that did have a RD04 model, which is this part number, and there is a difference. It's one of those that I was finally able to find out that the wires length that is going between one pickup coil and the other on the RD04 model is actually a little shorter, so they're not spread out as far. So I can only think that that is telling you that your ignition is firing at different times on a RD04 than an RD07. So that's one thing to think about. I did actually find a brand new pickup coil, and this is the part number right here, but it's one of those that it's not the entire wire and harness, which is why I had to cut the wires off of the old one, because I want to try to use the old wires to pull the new wire through. And I still think I'm actually going to have to add a little length to it. And the other thing is that you're going to need to drill out this bracket just a very slight bit. I'll put up here the actual drill bit size that I used so that you can actually use the same drill bit size. But once I did that, I was able to put the bolts in there, and I was able to mount it so that I could kind of show you how I was doing the troubleshooting, which is why it doesn't look like there's anything wrong right now, because I have the new one in there, but I got to take it back out so that I can run the wires back out. So let's go through the process of, you know, kind of showing you where the wires were located, and also pulling the new wires all the way through and routing them. So right next to your ignition is a little bracket right here, and normally in this bracket you have 3 Molex connectors, and kind of like this right here, which is the one that was right here for the pickup coils. But this one right here has already been bypassed in the past before I got the bike, so I don't really know 100% what that is going to. I'm going to have to look that up down the road if I ever have to go in there. So the Molex connector for your pickup coils that goes to your ignition is right here. That way you don't have to replace your wire from right here to there. You just have to replace the other side that's going down to your pickup coil. And here are the wires right here that I was kind of just taped together for the meantime so I could do all this troubleshooting. So the way it's run is it kind of loops up from right here and kind of follows this wire right here, and right down in here it goes into that little metal bracket right there, and then kind of keeps following along this wire, and you can somewhat see, hopefully, where that zip tie is. Well, on the other side of that zip tie, it keeps following along and has another zip tie that's normally right there, and then it comes down to right in here. So the good thing is you can actually change out your pickup coils without having to remove your entire side case. It's one of those that you can take these 3 bolts out right here, which are 8mm, in order to get access to your pickup coils. Now make sure that you have a pan or something underneath it, because this does have a little bit of oil in it. You don't have to drain your oil, but you may have a little bit of oil that's built up right here, and I'll show you that in just a minute. All right, and so you can see right there where some oil may build up right there on that side. So here's your two pickup coils. This one down here on the bottom is for your rear cylinder, and then this one on the top is actually for your front cylinder. And you can see the wire is kind of looped in between this little notch right here so that it flows up into your actual grommet right there. So let me get these two back off, or these two pickup coils back off, and these also are going to be a 8mm. So these are actually magnetized, so you may have to actually pull it a little bit in order to get it to release from the magnetization. And there you go. That's the one for the front. And there's the one for the rear. So one thing I do highly recommend once you get this off is a last final troubleshooting is to check the actual connections right here to make sure that you are getting still an open or, you know, extremely high out of tolerance, like I said, 180 to 280 ohms, just to make sure that you don't have a wire broken inside your actual harness. Now, like I said, the new one, I'm going to have to run through the harness because you can't get the entire harness anymore. But as you can see also, they are designed very, very similar. You know, I mean, it's more or less the wires are molded into the connector rather than on the outside. And as you can also see, they are mounted the same as far as the hole pattern, and far as I can tell, your pickup right there and your pickup right there are kind of at the same distance. So this pickup coil right here should 100% work without any issue. And like you saw earlier, I am getting the right ohms, but we'll see if it actually works like it's supposed to. All right, so the next part is trying to get these wires through this grommet. And I'm not really going to film that because I got a feeling it's going to take me a little bit of time. So let me go ahead and get these wires through that grommet, and then we'll going to get it into the actual heat shrink right here, and then I'll pick up back with you then. All right, so we got the wires ran back through the wiring harness, and I kind of wanted to show you about how much I had to add. And the reason being is that I actually had to add it to the longer side. Otherwise, if I was adding it to the shorter side, I wouldn't have to add any length of wire. But as you can see, that's about all I needed to add, which worked out pretty good for a couple of reasons. One, I was able to get back with the standardized color code going into the Molex connector. And two, like I just kind of talked about, I don't really have any of these ends, so I can actually still use the existing Molex connector, unlike what the other one was where they butt spliced it together. So it kind of worked out pretty good. So let me get this back in the Molex connector and get it hooked back up right here on the little block. All right, so to help us put the pickup coils back in correctly, screw one or two of your bolts into the, you know, the holder right there. And you're going to make sure that the magnet is facing on the inside. So I'm going to set that in there, and I'm going to use use the socket with the extensions to try to help me screw these in. All right, so that one started. Now let's position this bottom one. All right, now that we have that one started, we can go ahead and start on the top one. Like I said, making sure our magnet's facing the alternator right there, so I'm going to put one of them in. And then put the bottom one in. All right, so before I actually, tighten them all the way down any more than they are, let's go ahead and put this wire into the little channel right here, and let's make sure that we can turn this and get it back in the groove up here on the top, which we can just like that. I'm probably going to have to wait until I put the cover on to actually, hold this right here because of the fact it's wanting to turn on me. But now I know that I got enough length in here, I can go ahead and tighten all these back up. And once again, these are 8 millimeters. Alright, so your bolts on that are holding your pickup coils on don't really have a torque spec that I could find, so just make sure they're pretty snug and not going to come loose. After we have those tight, we're going to turn this, like I said a while ago, to the inside of the motorcycle, make sure it's kind of flush right there, and then we're going to put the cover on. Now just be careful that this bottom hole right here, you go ahead and put the bolt in if you have a guard on like I do. Otherwise, it's going to actually hit this guard. So I've got it already on there, and I'm going to kind of finagle it in there, just like so. And then, rotate it up, make sure that's in, and then start putting our bolts back in. And like the pickup coils, these are actually 8 millimeters as well. All right, I've got those tight, and they're like, once again, I couldn't find a torque spec for these, so just make sure they're fairly snug and not going to leak right down in here. All right, now that we've got the pickup coils all mounted and we got the cover back on the pickup coils, we can actually start routing our frame back the way it was in the factory. And I don't know whether these little zip ties right here are factory or not, but I found that it was pretty interesting because you can actually kind of pull it, the top of it, to you, and it comes apart just like that. I thought that was pretty neat, so I may have to see if I can find some of these. So I've got that one that I've got to pull off. All right, let's put that zip tie back on. All right, and then like I said earlier, this little metal bracket right here, it goes into there. And then it routes into this little wiring harness cover right there that will snap back together in a minute. All right, and then we'll put it back in the bracket with the little tab right here facing to the outside. And then plug the bottom side of it back in to hold it together. And then we'll plug our connector back onto the ignition coil. with this end right there going into that little tab right there. All right, and don't forget about your little zip tie if you still have it, or add another zip tie, kind of holding all these wires together, you know, that was in that metal bracket. All right, so your wires for your actual rear coils actually loop underneath the frame right here and come back up. Like so. And then, you know, your grounds, your green ones, go to your green lugs, and your blue ones go to your black lugs. And then once you have them connected, it's a little easier to connect them on this side. Once you have them connected, put it back down, and then we'll put it back underneath the screw that has the rest of your grounds on it going to earth. All right, let's tighten our mount that's holding our coils on with the ground, and this is a 10 millimeter. All right, now that I've got the coils mounted back up and I've got, you know, the ground right here, I've got my spark plug tester back hooked up. So let's turn it over and see if it's firing. Alright, so I just spent the last hour trying to look and figure out what was going on, because I tried to turn it over and I still wasn't getting a spark. But it just wasn't making any sense, because I knew for a fact that I had a bad coil. Well, because of all the troubleshooting that I was doing and everything, I done run the battery down, and I think that's why it was not getting enough juice to actually fire the coils. And I hooked the battery charger up and shot a little starter fluid in there, and I started getting a spark. So let's see if we can replicate that. So you see how there's a spark going on right there. So an hour of, you know, just sitting there banging my head, rechecking everything, make sure, you know, that the pickup coil was, you know, giving me, you know, 200 ohms like it was supposed to be and everything else. And finally I just thought about it. I'm like, well, maybe I just don't have enough battery to actually, you know, fire the coils. And sure enough, I think that's what it is, because it started up and, you know, it's firing like it's supposed to. So I'm going to go ahead and put the gas tank back on it and take it for a ride, and hopefully make sure everything else is good to go. I know this video may not make a whole lot of sense. Hopefully it does, and hopefully I can make it somewhat make sense, because, you know, like I said, the book wasn't very good at troubleshooting it for you, and I just was having to come up with the troubleshooting on my own from looking at the wiring diagram and stuff like that. So if you thought it was a good video, y'all please give me a big thumbs up. I very much appreciate that, and subscribe down below. You know, leave me a comment. Let me know, you know, what kind of troubleshooting steps I should have done that y'all may know about that would have made this process a lot easier, because, you know, I definitely enjoy y'all's feedback on stuff that, you know, helps me, you know, do a lot better job. And, you know, share this with some of your friends, share this with some people that may think they have a bad pickup coil, and hopefully some of my troubleshooting steps, you know, will help them out. Or, you know, share this with some people that may have a bad coil and don't really know how to get a new one because it's been discontinued. You know, like I said, I've got the part number, and all you have to do is just, you know, feed it back through the harness and you'll be good to go. So until the next video, always take this in group, and I'll see y'all then.